So welcome to this session. I'm really excited to have you. Megan Raisley is my co-host, and we're both from Edgi, the Environmental Data and Governance Initiative. If you haven't already found the document, or if you want to open it in a separate window from the Chicho, I don't know how to pronounce that, chat, here is a link to it, and then you can have it take up your entire screen real estate. We will be working in this document quite a lot today, so I definitely strongly recommend having it open in a place that you can edit it easily. Just to get you a little bit oriented, the goals of this session are to briefly reintroduce what Edgi is and the EU project. Technically, I have slides, but it'll go so fast. And I just want to say, before anybody gets all nervous about how fast information is coming and going, this document here is pretty complete with, like, you know, when there's breakouts, the prompts are pretty thoroughly written in there. But in addition to that, we have, I don't even know how many people from ESIP who you can ping in the chat to say, hey, wait, I need tech help with something. So please take advantage of that. There's also both me and Megan running this workshop. We designed this together on research that we've been doing together for quite a while. So you're welcome to ask us for help, but even when we're in the breakouts, the two of us will be hopping around in the breakouts just to make sure that everybody's doing fine, finds each other, knows what they're supposed to be doing. So I will say there's a lot we're trying to fit in here. There's going to be a lot of sort of information, but I think that the easiest way to digest a lot of information is to get really hands-on with it. So that's what we're doing, and we're here to help if that's a lot. Backing up a little bit, as you maybe already know, ESIP has community participation guidelines and reporting processes that are documented here. I'm linking these. It is really important that this be an inclusive space. It is the kind of community that we're trying to be. I personally would encourage you to go a little bit further than saying, oh, it's a code of conduct, be nice, whatever. Honestly, if there's something that we can do to make things more inclusive, like a piece of tech is hard for you to work with, or you know, some visual isn't working for you and you need me to make it bigger while I'm talking, or something like that, or even stuff that's more on the like classic code of conduct side of things, where somebody says something and it just kind of lands weird with you, feel free to hit me up and we can talk about it, because it would be better to sort of bring up things that are slightly uncomfortable before they become very uncomfortable. And that is the way that we make change in a culture. So you're all extremely welcome here. I am gonna throw you into a lot of stuff, and I hope that you can help each other out. I see a lot of familiar faces and also a lot of new faces. And for those of you who've been here before or who've been around some of these tools, you will be in breakouts as teams. And so I really would appreciate and encourage people helping each other out, bringing knowledge, bringing, like, you know, well, let's just think about it this way. There isn't going to be like right answers here. There's going to be hard questions that real people face. And so I want you to like kind of have that understanding going in that this is going to be challenging work that we're approaching. And the reason that I'm going to just like throw this at you is that it's kind of how it feels when you're like existing in the world, in a community, and an environmental issue comes up, and then you go, okay, well, what do I do? And nobody's going to tell you the answer. So this is an empathy building session, as well as sort of a tour of the tools that we've been working with. I did promise a slight tour of what we're working with, so I'll give you screen share now on this slideshow. Again, this is also linked in the document, so if you want to take it at your own pace, you're also welcome to. But formally, let me introduce myself, Kelsey Braceman, and Megan Raisley, my co-presenter from the Environmental Data and Governance Initiative. Edgi, or EDGI, Edgi for short, we work on a bunch of different stuff. This is like the shortest intro to Edgi I've ever given, but basically, we're working on accountability through transparent, collaborative, and community-centered environmental research, technology, and decision-making. And specifically, we're we're working with the EU project, the Environmental Enforcement Watch, but it does say EU because it's gross, because it's like toxics and stuff. And the goals of that project are to collaborate with impacted communities, prototype new forms of public engagement, and bring attention to the widespread lack of environmental enforcement. And I will give a spot for questions in a minute, but again, this is all going to go pretty fast. And this is just to situate the work. This is the work of a team. It's not just me and Megan. It's been a lot of different people, a lot of volunteers, a lot of academics, people from community groups, student groups have come in and left. And so I don't even know how many people have touched this project, but it's dozens. And it's been about 2 years now that we've been working on it. And this is kind of the question that we're looking at, is this intersection of what do impacted communities need from environmental governance, and what does data bring to that? And the goal, of course, is to see what exists in that intersection and try to expand the intersection where we can. Of course, it'll never fully cover what impacted communities need, because a lot of times there's this question around like, what is data, whose data counts, and also just like, is data really appropriate when people are having this lived experience? Like, do we want to say the narrative counts as data, or do we want to just say, hey, maybe we should just believe people when they say they're hurting? So there's a lot of really interesting things going on about all the different parts of this, and I could ramble for too long, so I'll stop. But having to do with like who collects the data, for what purpose. If we start to look at what do impacted communities need, we've spoken with more than 25 different community groups over the course of 2 years. But I can't say they're like randomly selected at all. It's mostly self-selected groups that we've reached out to and that have the space to respond to us. So there is some bias in that. But we have made a point of reaching out to environmental justice communities. Black, Hispanic, Indigenous communities are definitely represented among the groups that we've talked to. And I've just done a project. I think I have over 125 questions now, and we have some subset of that you'll get to work with a little bit later that community groups have brought. These are the kinds of questions they're asking. I'm not going to read all of these out, but I'll just give you a second to like skim over some of the keywords. So you can see that these are very real, very urgent types of challenges that people are feeling, and that they're potentially quite complicated to try to answer using data, especially data that needs to have been collected for many years with high consistency, in areas that you might not have control over, or in data areas that you might not get to know about. This is just sort of another way of looking at it. We started looking at tagging, and this is another thing that we'll look at in our second breakout, is kind of this idea of taking challenges and recategorizing them to say, okay, well, what questions are people asking, and how can we think about answering them? So that's a very brief take on questions, and we don't need to focus on it too much right here, because that's going to be your first breakout, is talking about is engaging with some of these questions. And so we can talk a little bit about what data brings. This is going to be even shorter. We just republished our website, which is environmentalenforcementwatch.org. And it has these really cool resources and tools. And if you were here at the summer meeting, these will look familiar to you. We had a cross-program notebook and a watershed notebook at the time, and I direct linked them to you, but now they're available on our website in this data tab. And in addition to that, we have congressional reports. We originally had them for a couple of committees. Now we have them for every state and every congressional district, and they auto update. And then we have this set of external resources, which is another thing we'll talk about in the second breakout. That basically I categorize more than 40 different data sets from the federal government that are data sets and data tools that are open to the public to try to engage with some of these questions. And you'll see that it's really cool what's there, but also how hard it is to use them and to cross-connect them. That was our whirlwind tour. I will now take questions. Well, okay. Thanks so much for listening to that ridiculously fast presentation of a lot of material. And what I'm hoping is you're all quiet because you're just really excited to get into these breakouts. And I think we have just the right number of people for some reasonably sized groups. And thank you, Megan. Yeah, there'll be 4 groups. If you go to the bottom of page 2 in the Google document, which I see there's at least 29 of you in here, so you probably are all here, you'll see that there's this section called answering user questions. There's these bold instructions. Those are for all of the groups. And then there's these sections that are group 1 with a persona. Maybe I should be screen sharing this as well. So here's the instructions. And then like if you're in breakout group 1, you get group 1. This says who you are. This is the question you're trying to answer. And what you'll notice is there's these 3 different sections here. And this is going to be quite familiar for summer session folks. But basically, there's going to be 3 parts. One is while you're trying to answer the question, I would like one of you to take on the role of sort of the UX observer. And you're going to, while participating, also be writing down what you tried and maybe even why you tried it. Like I clicked on this because I thought it would get me that, and how it went. The other part is going to be the findings. So, okay, I'm actually trying to answer this question. What are we learning? What are we confused about? What are we concerned about? And that will be another person's role. So somebody should be the UX person. Somebody should be the findings person. And I will not be asking you to report back on your findings. So don't worry about that. But do just think about what it's like to have this process. And then the next part is optional, just other notes if anyone wants to add them. The 3 roles that I'd like you to take on, in addition to the narrative notes, the UX person, and the finding person, is it's really helpful if one person in your group can also share a screen in case anything is difficult to navigate. So somebody who's a little bit more comfortable navigating around the tech would be really great to have there. And I know I didn't introduce the tools very much here, and that is intentional. I want you to sort of experience them like somebody who's coming to our site might for the first time. But they are also linked in this document all over the place. There's links. So any questions on the breakouts?
One question is that, do we want, are folks going to be choosing their breakout group?
In the first one, you will just be randomly assigned. In the second one, you'll get choices, and I'll explain those a bit better. And I will say also, we have until 35 past the hour for this. So you only get 20 minutes. And I know that that's pretty rough, but I just want to see how far you can get.
I feel the urge to tell people that I was a part of this similar session at the last ESA meeting, and it's totally worth it. It's a wonderful journey to go on together. So I'm excited to see what happens next.
Thank you.
Looks like there's a question in the chat, just by the way. I don't know if that's.
Yeah, Jeff, that's a good question, the redistricting one. I can answer that. Yeah, I can answer that offline more, but basically it's a problem.
Absolutely.
A lot of things that are challenging.
We've been discussing it somewhat too, so.
Yeah. Cool. Well, so I want to make sure you have lots of time in your groups. Oh, sorry, did you have another question?
No, I was just going to say the breakout rooms are ready whenever we're ready to go. So
excellent. Well, let's go and we'll pop in if there's any questions.
Okay. So your room number corresponds with your group number. And all right.
Thank you.
We only had a few more play buttons, Denise. You almost had it. You almost had the answer.
What did you know and when did you know it? Oh, sorry, we're back.
Welcome back. I hope you all enjoyed that hook around your neck yank back to the main room. I will say, I will be absolutely shocked if any of you had an easy time or felt like that was enough time, but that was about what it was meant to be. Um, it's genuinely hard. And I'm really curious to hear a bit more about your experience. And I give that introduction partially to say, like, feel free to say things that might sound a little harsh, because we know. But this is our moment for Shareback. We only have 5 minutes for Shareback, so do keep your comments short because there's a lot of you in this room. But I'd love to hear, what did you notice? How did you feel? Like, what emotions did you feel trying to do this? And did anything surprise you? And if you want to do, we can do like keeping stack, where Denise has a hand up, so you can go first. But if anybody wants to go after, just write the word stack in the channel and we'll put you on stack to go after.
I usually feel like I'm pretty web savvy and pretty search savvy. I failed miserably, like at every step along the way. You know, I keep coming back. If this is meant to be a broadly accessible sort of information, if me being kind of tech and data savvy was having this much trouble, that's kind of worrying.
Yeah, thank you. And that is a very real experience. If you're a community group trying to figure this stuff out, you're probably not coming from a tech background. So this is genuinely quite difficult. And our tools are also difficult. Susan, I see your hand.
I was gonna say, Dave in our group got us quickly to the congressional report cards, and we spent most of our time there. So once we landed there, we were in a very nice PDF with lots of graphs. Yeah, we had feedback on graphs in terms of scale and things like that. It made me think I kind of wanted to poke around more in other parts of the website to see if we should have been looking in other things, but our question was specifically like, what are you going to talk to this senator about? And I thought that the PDF format for someone who's not super data savvy would be helpful and feel pretty comfortable. But I almost sense that for data comfortable folks, it was like, oh, it's a PDF. Like, I'm not going to be able to play with this, which probably isn't your audience.
We've been surprised by our audience, to be honest. We've had a shocking lack of people saying, no, I can't do this when we bring up the notebooks, which is really cool to see. But it's we usually do it in a pretty hand-holdy way. Yeah, Dave?
I think with just relating to what Susan was saying, when we dove right into this Arkansas question, and then we started looking at the data, I mean, we kind of are all data geeks, right? But I just have to wonder, do people even know how to read a graph? Or would people even know that, the Clean Water Act was separated in one graph, but then it was combined with 3 other violations in the following graphs? How do you kind of weed that stuff out? I would almost think that as a service, you might want to provide more in-depth information on those particular questions. So if you can ask the questions yourselves, if you live there, then answer them in the report, and that way people could really go down and say, oh yeah, I would ask that. Oh, and here's the answer. Oh yeah, here's what the information shows. I'm just not sure how many people will really dive into the data.
Thanks, Dave. Dan, you're going to be our last question.
All right, so yeah, the Python, there's definitely a sense of confusion in whether we were supposed to limit ourselves to the website itself or to just find it at all costs sort of thing. But we ended up landing on the Python notebook for the
cross program.
Yes, the cross program, and the Python modules are very easy to use, especially like having drop-down menus to select the state and other things, because I've definitely used some in the past where you actually have to type those in and it's not always clear where you need to put the information in. So that was really nice. But then once we actually got some of the graphs out of it, even having some light descriptors of what the x-axis means. So when it says quarters, what is that? Being unfamiliar with the data, I'm not 100% certain what that is or what I'm looking at or what's being measured, so to speak. And another thing that was pointed out with our group is the color palette is random, but it threw us off because there's different colors on the bars, but the different colors are themselves meaningless as far as we could tell. Or Morgan helped us out a little bit with that.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks all. So, this is like a pretty challenging thing to try and work with. And I will say, we consider all of our work, even though it is now publicly accessible more through the website than it was through just our GitHub. It's very much works in progress, and it's stuff that we have seriously struggled to iterate on the UX of, because you can easily see something that is hard, but it's really hard to see what's a way to make it easy. And so this has been a real adventure trying to figure out like what is available from the government, and then what can we do that is in any way better, because it is really a genuinely hard problem. And what we're hoping to do, like, this is not an adversarial thing with the EPA, right? Like, we want to bring our insights back and forth with them and say, hey, this is what we're noticing. This is what's working well for people, rather than just being people who show up with a critique and say, well, it's not accessible enough to the communities, because it's not, but that's not very productive. So that's kind of what we're doing here. And as you can see, it's genuinely quite challenging. And if anybody wants to get involved, you're so welcome. In the interest of time, I'm going to pivot us. And I will say, by the way, thank you so much for the detailed notes. As I mentioned in the summer meeting as well, this type of feedback is actually extremely useful to us as we continue to work on this and iterate on it. We might not get to it in a timely way at all, but it definitely goes in our like backlog of things we ought to be working on. We have a second breakout, and this is going to be quite different, probably a little bit easier to approach, hopefully. And it's also going to be a bit choose your own adventure. So I mentioned before that we have this external resources tab, and possibly some of you got to interact with it. So I should say, backing up, there's going to be 3 different asks here, and you get to choose which group you're going to be in. I think we might even have the breakout rooms set up so you get to click join yourself, so you don't have to put your name down anywhere. But we're looking at sort of data portals and federal data tools, and this is a pretty way of exploring different EPA EPA and other federal government branch accessible data tools. And you can see, as I believe someone noted in the notes, there are so many of them, and it's very confusing. But we have them, at least they're on a page. One of the things that we started to do is try to categorize these tags. And I think I might have mentioned one of the things that we're hoping to do with these tags is then add a little filter bar at the top here where you could say something like checkbox fish, health, contaminants, or something like that. And then you'd be able to get just the ones that are relevant to what you're working on, and helpfully find the right tool for your needs. So this is what that looks like. This is the spreadsheet that we pull those from. It's the name, the nickname, the link to the database itself, and then a description that we usually pull from the site itself. And you can see that I've started to do tagging of these. And what I'm hoping you can help me do, as at least somewhat experts in this space, or even if you're new to this, I would love if you can help me validate those tags and say, yeah, that's really what's in there. Yeah, I opened the site and it does look like that. So we have a couple of different questions. Question 1 is federal data tool sufficiency. Are there federal data tools missing from this list that should be on it? And then I would hope that you could add them for me. So this is a really good room for people who are pretty familiar with data tools. The other thing that can happen in this room is here are these user questions that I mentioned earlier. So we semi-anonymize these by what type of group they are. But these are questions, these are real, genuine questions that we've gotten from groups. Can emerging contaminants releases be evaluated in relation to environmental justice communities? A Waterkeeper Coalition wants to know. So this is not a data set we've published or made public, but it is something that I would love for you to get a little hands-on with today. If you have a look at this and then you can say, hey, what questions don't seem answerable using the resources that you can find on the internet, and especially I've already done some of the work for you by compiling them onto this external resources page. So if it's not there, I couldn't find it. So that's group one, is the sufficiency of the tools. Group two is the tagging, which I already mentioned. Are the tags reasonable? Are there any missing? I also made this document where you can look at the full set of the tags that I've tried to use and say, okay, well, if we look at this list as a whole, this category is missing. So that's that group. And then also, are the tags well applied? And you can actually look at that spreadsheet as well and see if any are mistagged there. And then the third group is the data portal accessibility. And this is much more of a, I don't want to think too hard group. Basically, you'll go in here and you say, hey, does it have an API? Does it have downloadable CSVs? Does it have a user interface? And it's kind of just a yes or no. And I would love, you actually have access to a separate spreadsheet here. And I would love if you can just help fill out these columns for us, because it turns out it's hard even just to answer these yes or no questions. So this is the part where it's like real work that will materially move our work forward. I hope this is still fun for you. But I want to make sure that you have as much time as possible in it. So I will take questions on those now, but I also want to say we will again be dropping in and out of those rooms. So feel free to jump into a room or hesitate to jump into a room, because I'll be both in this main room and Megan as well. And then we'll also be in the rooms. So you can ask us questions wherever you find us. We'll come to you wherever you are. Yeah, any questions? Oh, and I should say, we'll be in those rooms until 15 after the hour.
Okay, I'm going to open rooms then if no one has any questions. Cool. Okay.
Kelsey, just finished. I was saying, some of the changes are simple and some are not, but I think there are ways to make the simple changes, and creating those bridges and that communication would be really interesting.
Yeah, and I would love, I mean, Susan, I should follow up with you after this, but I would love to figure out how to better plug into talking to the agencies directly, because I wish we were doing that more. And I'm sure we could be somehow. I just don't know who to talk to all the time. But you probably do.
I can get started for sure.
One good thing to start, one good thing, Kelsey, you might want to do is identify the chief information officers for those, or chief data officers for those agencies, because they have the Geospatial Data Act requires every agency that has offers data to have a chief data officer now.
Yeah, that's a great thought. I actually didn't know that, so that's perfect. Thank you all for your contributions here. I super appreciate this. I know, once again, you were probably rudely yanked back into the main room in the middle of a thought, sentence, or project. If you're still working on something, I will continue to use this document over the next several weeks, so feel free to add stuff. But I think we have to transition now into our sort of shareback and reflection. I did want to leave the next 2 minutes for shareback of the same type as in the first group, especially because these are cross group. There might be some kind of interesting insights to share. But again, you have to keep it pretty short, sorry. Don't hesitate to speak up, but do keep it within a 10-second-ish range.
I
This is,
can, oh, go ahead, Dave.
oh, I'm sorry, Meg. I was just going to say that, you know, what I found is some of the services have been decommissioned by EPA, so they no longer offer some of those data sets. But I think if you dig deep enough, you know, they have to archive that data that they collected as an agency, even though they might not offer it, or they migrated to some other program.
Thanks, that's really helpful info. Megan, did you want to go?
I'm not sure if this is what you're asking for right now, but I'll try to be fast. I was in the group of folks that nerd out on metadata and like organizing things. And we were looking at your tags, and it just, it's really exciting, and it's a good list. It was just causing us to have so many more questions about who comes here, what are the 10 to 15 things they most commonly ask, like building this site up versus, you know, just making sure that a Google search can get you, you know, you can somehow tap into that. And yeah, it's just causing a lot of big picture questions about what you want to make possible in the future. So
yeah, that's excellent. I'm very excited to read your notes. Thank you. So let's see. What time are we at? We're at closing reflection time, according to my handy agenda. So there's a lot of you, and we covered a lot. I hope I challenged you today. I'm fairly certain everybody found at least something that was hard. And I really, really appreciate this, you all working with me. And I wanted to invite us to do, I know a lot of people do well processing verbally, and a lot of people don't. And so I wanted to just give us, I think I put in 5 minutes in the agenda for just looking at, just sort of taking a moment to reflect on your own experience today. And on page, it looks like page 9 now, this document is getting a little absurd. On page 9, there's this section called session close. And I was hoping that everybody could claim a bullet point and answer some questions. And just, it's mostly for you, but it's also for me to learn how this went, what you found. And following that session, which you're welcome to just start on, I see some of you are, just to walk you through what's going to happen with the remaining not that long of this session. We'll have, let's see, 5 minutes to have a closing reflection, and then a 5-minute closing circle in which we'll do a little bit of verbal shareback, including some insights that we might bring back towards the whole of ESIP. All right, I know it was short again, but if we can sort of slowly come back, and I will guide us through a closing circle. And the questions that we're trying to surface here are, what did we discover? How can we help each other? What knowledge and resources do we have to share? And what important questions remain? And I think we'll spend, 3 minutes thinking about and sharing these. And again, feel free to use stack in the chat if somebody's already talking, and then you can be next. But what came up for you? I know that for me, the knowledge and resources you all brought today, and especially the ones you left as notes in the document, are really, really helpful and validating on the type of work we're doing. So thank you very much for all of that. Susan?
I would say I really enjoyed reading the questions and just kind of recentering and grounding in when people are really worried about their health or about their community, about their family. Like, we at ESIP, we immerse right in the data and the metadata and the ontologies. And I just love the grounding in, we can have so much more of an impact on the world if we can remember that making data accessible to a much, much broader populace is how we can really make an impact. And so I love that grounding, and just, it gets me really excited.
Dan, I see your hand.
Yeah, so one of the things is I haven't really delved into a lot of federal agency or government data, but just the huge range of available data sets and tools, and they're all in their own isolated little systems. And it's a little bit mind-boggling, honestly, because that's just petabytes and petabytes of data just all isolated, and it all interrelates somehow or another, but it's all this different data that's just out there in some way or another.
Thanks, Megan, for your comment in chat. And thanks everybody for joining and bringing so much energy and focus and knowledge or naivety, depending. Like both of those are really valuable here. And I'll just share one last slide as folks begin to exit. Just if you wanted to follow up, both Megan Raisley and I are on the ESIP Slack and would absolutely love to be contacted by you to follow up with the work. We also have open meetings generally. So especially hit us up if you want to collaborate with our team at all, even if it's just a drop in. We've had people show up and say, hey, I just want to ask questions of you. And that's pretty neat to get to be a resource to people, especially like Susan mentioned, getting grounded in community questions. If we can help share some of that experience for something you're working on, that's really lovely for us. And if you can come in and share the knowledge that you have from an agency or from anywhere you're coming from, even if you just want to drop in for a session, you're welcome. If you want to show up and do the work with us, you're extremely welcome, of course. But even just the little interventions are really helpful. Thanks very much, everybody. It's been lovely.